welcome to Compress It Like an Idiot live for no reason other than just to have a nice time and talk. We haven't done this for a while. Oh shit! Sorry, this stream was open on another tab. We haven't done this for a while. How are all you guys? Are you well?
Doing good.
Hey,
Doing
chat.
good.
Oh yeah, I'm good. Thought you meant the chat. Yeah.
I meant you guys. We'll talk
Also
to
the chat.
Also the chat.
It's only you guys in the chat anyway, apart from Japonski, who
There
wants to
were
know what is a
17
side
waiting.
change. Say hi in the chat, everyone. Yeah, we haven't done this for a
Hello
while,
in the
and
chat.
we've all been very busy. It seems we've all been making music, and just thought we could all get together and just talk about ourselves. I guess.
We've been finishing albums.
For everyone's finishing albums or in the middle of finishing albums.
Yes.
Which is I like very much. It'll only be a while before we start our own record label.
It's happening. It's coming.
Yeah. How are we doing in the chat? Hi, Dara. Dara. Alex-esque. So, we have our first question. What is a side change? I would say that is when some change falls out of the side of your pocket and
Side change
and dips the synth pad in the process. That's what I would say.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, you're describing that would make me think though. You could in the same way that you side chain something like a kick drum to a bass sound, you could side change, quote unquote, something by having that same side chained impulse, the kick drum or what have you, then change a parameter or something. Maybe like the velocity of that kick drum or the loudness of it. Get weird, get wild, get random.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, you don't have to just sidechain a kick to something either. You can sidechain anything to anything, can't you? I use it sometimes on vocals with other instrumental parts. If we're talking about side chaining and it's not side changing.
Broccoli is finishing an onion and clam salad.
Nice.
Sounds delicious.
Would side chain have more to do with a game of football where halfway through the game you change the side?
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Is that the
That's
code?
it.
I cracked the code.
That's what he meant.
I think this guy's come to the wrong channel.
That's what they
hasn't
meant.
he?
Yeah. I think it's gone. I can't see that comment anymore, unless it was before we started.
Right, it's the third comment in.
Have you got any Prodigy? Play some Prodigy.
No, that's copyrighted.
I can't do that. I'll get into trouble. We can talk about them though. Gus, you've just finished an album, haven't you?
Yes.
How do you feel? How do you feel inside?
Pretty good, actually. So I got a mono machine a month or two ago, and when I got it, I started messing around with it and was like, oh man, this thing's really cool, blah, blah, blah. And I was looking at the mono machine drum on Octatrack, and like, I don't want to get stuck in this loop of, all right, now I'm going to learn these things and really learn how to use them, and then I'll make some music with them. Like, because I've had Octatrack and machine drum for a little while, and I've kind of been stuck in that thought of like, really got to learn them and then I'll do something. And when I got on a machine, I was like, I caught myself doing that same sort of thing. And I more or less kind of like just stopped everything and was like, you can't do anything else until you have at least an EP of music with these 3 boxes. And it was also kind of inspired a little bit by like Untilted. Wasn't that machine drum, mono machine, Nord drum, and like an MPC or something? Am I right?
I'm not sure. Was that an album by someone?
Altecker, Untilted.
Let's look it up, shall we? Let's look it up.
So you learned how to use the machine by making an album. with it?
Sort of. I mean, I had a machine drum for a little while before Mono Machine, so they're really similar in the way they work. They're not. There's obviously some key differences between them, but for the most part, they're kind of on the same wavelength. But it was more just kind of like I have these incredible, powerful boxes,
Mhm.
and I've never actually released an Electron album before. I should just do that. So like
Mhm.
over the course of like, I think it was like 2 weeks or so, wrote out a few tracks. So it's 8 tracks, and they're all basically the same. Very glitchy, pointy sounds, lots of arpeggiation. Yeah.
I listened to it when you sent it to me and did a bit of tidying up in here and rearranging everything. And then it came to an end and I was like, oh, I didn't actually listen to that at all. So I listened to it again immediately. And I liked it very much. I thought... sorry, go on.
I was going to say, essentially the way it was set up was Machine Drum and Mono Machine both ran into Octatrack in A and B and C and D. And then after that, it was essentially just 2 neighbor tracks. So just like effects or whatever after those through tracks. And then something to kind of just grab the sounds from the Machine Drum and Mono Machine and mangle them up a bit. And then either sort of using song mode independently on all 3 boxes to where I could have, pattern 1 on Octatrack and pattern 3 on Machine Drum and pattern 10 on Mono Machine, kind of like all mixed up at the same time, or sort of actually having them all follow the same sort of, pattern chaining thing. But yeah.
So when you do stuff like that, do you have to have one that's kind of the master song arranger, or do you have to arrange the songs on each box individually?
That's what I did for several of them, was arranged each individually. That's not entirely necessary. From what I understand, you can set Mono Machine to work the same way Machine Drum works. So you can send, if you have a pattern on Machine Drum, you can set it up so if you were to press a particular note on a keyboard, it'll jump to that pattern. So in that way, you could essentially have your pattern on Octatrack send out a MIDI note to Machine Drum, and that single MIDI note is going to pick a particular pattern from Machine Drum. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. Does that help when... So are you kind of like quite determined in how you're arranging everything, or are you leaving that a little bit to chance a little bit?
It's a little bit of both, and not every track was done the same way, but like ideally it would be a very quick spot. That's why I really like the way that works with Machine Drum, is because you can just sort of select, all right, let's see what it sounds like. I'll just, use this MIDI note for this pattern. I don't really like that. You can quickly choose another pattern. Apparently you're supposed to be able to do the same thing on Mono Machine, but I had trouble getting it to work. So in a perfect setup, that's how I would have it, is Octatrack would be the main song arranger, in that you would press, well, you wouldn't really, you would have a MIDI track on the Octatrack where if you sent it, C2, that's going to select a particular pattern on both Machine Drum and Mono Machine. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. How do you feel about working like that?
I haven't figured out how to yet. That's the problem.
Okay.
Gus, what's the I'm not familiar with the mono machine. It's one of the older Electron boxes. What is it? Is it a synth or a sample player?
Digital synth. So it's kind of the if machine drum is analog rhythm, then mono machine is analog 4.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that Ortega album was called Untitled for decades. I can now see that it's actually not called that.
I'm so happy to hear this because it hasn't been
I should
decades
really
for
read.
me.
I should learn to read, really, shouldn't I? I really should learn to read words.
Did you do any like editing afterwards, Gus, or was it just straight takes? Just left them
No,
as they were,
straight
just straight out
takes.
of the boxes.
Yep, stereo out recordings from
So
those
you just-
boxes.
You just like went into the room, set it rolling. Do you play? Because I've never been on those boxes. So do you twiddle
More-
knobs while you're doing it?
No, it's there. Each track is kind of like the only sort of interaction I have is pressing play.
Mhm.
That's sort of the way I usually do stuff is I set up sequences to where it's gonna, play the whole thing through, similar to like the last More Kicks Than Friends that I did, where it's like my interaction is pressing play, and then after that it's just the boxes and the sequence playing through. So yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And what do you record to? Where does it go? Into the computer?
Generally speaking, it'll first go through the 1604 Mackie mixer. Then from the mixer, it goes into analog heat. From analog heat into an FMR, really nice limiting amplifier. And then into my audio interface. And then from there, 90% of the time, it goes through an EQ to cut out like a mid-side EQ to cut out the sides on the low end, then into
A
soothe.
side change.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
There it is.
And then it through soothe too, and then into drum bus. And then lately it's been going through Nick's excellent EQ.
Oh, I didn't
I-
try.
I-
He
well, I-
sent it to
I'm-
me to
Hey,
test
Nick.
today. I've just realized.
The EQ is at all times disabled. It's not actually on, but it does run through it.
He
the
looks at
equivalent of putting it on the fridge.
he looks at the pictures. Nick, how are you? You all right? You having a nice day?
I'm all right, having a great day until I joined you.
Nice.
Can I go with my usual self, or should I be nice and warm and cuddly?
I didn't know there was that side to you. Are you saying
You should start by turning your mic down.
Oh,
No, I think
about
he
that?
sounds all right. But then
He's loud.
I have compressed you all like an idiot in my headphones.
Is it better?
That's
Much.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
would say continue to turn it down.
So, when's the album coming out then? User friendly.
Tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow. Gosh.
Mhm.
Wow. Is there like a link that we can put in the chat to send people there? Or
I don't really know.
do you not want anyone to listen to it?
It's not me. It's everyone else doesn't want to listen to it. That's for certain. But I don't really know how the whole Bandcamp thing works because right now I have it set as private. So I don't know if I make it public. What happens? Can you hear it?
Yeah.
I think
And
you
you-
can. I don't know. I think you can like.
Even though I have the release
read
date
it.
set for
Yeah.
tomorrow, if I set it to public, does it
Yeah.
release?
I don't think it makes a difference. I think is it just saying you're just marking a release date. So if it is public, it's public, even if the release date is after when you've made it public. That's what
Yeah.
I've found from experience.
I think you can maybe schedule it and it'll show all the names of the tracks, but you won't be able to play them. And it will say like available, blah 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 blah, or you can do like a pre-order thing. I think.
I mean,
don't know.
really,
I'm
there's-
comfortable.
no reason whatsoever I couldn't just release it right now.
Right here,
Let's do it
live
now.
on
Yeah, yeah,
stream,
Do it on
exclusive for you watching in the crowd, in the chat.
Release it now.
User friendly. I think you need to send the link to me so I can post it in the chat as I am the moderator.
Yes.
All right.
Here we go.
Questions from the crowd? No. Everyone's
And
pretty chill.
Oh, but a great comment. You won't get many sales if it's in private.
There we go. You got
Well,
your first sale there.
but
Your
I was
first sale
gonna make it public tomorrow. All right. It's now public. Let's see if it works.
Just put it back if you want.
Is
You
it
can
because
make
it was a
public for
Friday?
like an
Gus?
hour.
It was really for no reason at all, other than it was just like that's the date. Because I kind of got. All right, I
Would
put
you-
the link in our chat. I'm curious if somebody
Okay.
clicks on it, can you play the track?
Someone else.
Gus, would you say it puts you in a Friday mood? Is it a good Friday album?
Oh no.
No.
Definitely Sunday evening.
Sunday evening.
Before
Fearing
you have a
work.
awful week. That
Is it this
sort of
one?
thing. Yeah. Oh wow, it works.
Hey, there's like a video as well.
Yeah.
What's the video?
It's literally just a video of the boxes playing through it. It's proof that it's one sequence.
How do you put that on there? I've never seen that before.
When was the last time you used Bandcamp, Rush?
Can't remember.
It's Rude
Exactly.
NHS,
Two.
surely, isn't it?
Mode
You've
2,
got-
probably. Don't think I've done it. Oh no, the one I did last year.
So user friendly. Can I post the link to this in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now, some people are getting exclusive streams or exclusive viewings of the new Barbie movie and the new Oppenheimer movie. You all in chat are lucky enough to get an exclusive streaming of the new user-friendly album. And I think that's where you want to be.
Go and buy it, everyone. Support
Yes.
people.
Did Dave
run
X
up
not
those
do
numbers.
some music for the Barbie film? I heard. My girlfriend told me.
I think there's
Is there an Aphex track on it or something?
I can't. I think I might have heard something along those lines as well, and I think Barbie Girl's in it as well, which makes
By
a lot of
Aqua.
sense. Yeah, Aqua, the Aqua one.
It is a good tune. that.
Aqua.
I bought that on CD. On
Did
single.
you?
I mean, I was like 10 or 11, so.
Wow,
Oh, please leave the chat.
the 90s.
I mean, it was number
Headline next,
one,
that's-
wasn't it? Went to number one.
His next favorite song. He's just trying to be cool.
All right, stop talking about Aqua. I don't want to talk about Aqua anymore.
Okay, all right,
Gus.
let's move on.
Is this an all electron album? You said.
Yes. Octatrack, mono machine, and machine drum.
Okay. I see that you mostly work with just electron boxes, except for your Nord modular, Nord drum, the little red boy, as I like to affectionately call it, and then your modular rig. Is there a reason for that? Is there something about electron boxes that's you, or is it that they just do what you want to do?
Honestly, I would say I'm more of a Eurorack person. Like I still kind of view myself as a Eurorack person, even though kind of slowly over the past year or two, I've kind of completely, probably like 2 years now, I've gotten really into Electron, but kind of was for a long time, I was strictly Eurorack, and I wouldn't say I stuck my nose up at Electron, but I kind of stuck my nose up at it. Like just, boxes in general, just they didn't interest me at all. And then once I got the analog rhythm, I really got into it. And I think one of the reasons that they work for me so well is because I started with modular. So going modular, or really, I mean, it doesn't even necessarily need to be Electron, but I kind of stuck my nose up at it. Like just, boxes in general, just they didn't interest me at all. Why is my voice speaking back?
What just happened?
Trippy, bro.
It was me. Sorry, boys.
You
Don't do that.
I checked the video
I was
on YouTube.
I really tripped
I
out
didn't
then.
like
I
it.
thought I was
Did anyone
like,
else
what
think they're
the-
having like an aneurysm or a stroke?
Yeah. I couldn't be sure if it was that, like, because it.
My drugs
Yeah.
kicking in.
Yeah.
My ibuprofen came in.
Yeah.
Peaked too early.
The drugs I left strategically stashed in Ned's Russ apartment have gone off.
Oh, that's what it is. You slipped it in my kettle.
All right, enough.
Thank you, Nick.
anyway.
sorry. Where were we?
Understanding how like a modular synthesizer works, or really just like understanding really fundamentally how a synthesizer works, which like is kind of an inherently modular thing, even if it's not a modular synthesizer. That really helps wrap your head around how electron boxes work. They're actually really modular. And then the other thing is the main sequencer that I've used for years for Eurorack was a NerdSec, which is a tracker, which electrons are obviously like really very similar to trackers.
Gotcha.
They don't look the same really, but for the most part, they kind of work the same way.
Mhm.
So no, there's not really, I'm not like, only sort of electron because of X, Y, or Z. It's just they're the most interesting to me
When
right
you're
now.
sequencing stuff, Gus, because the electron boxes lend themselves to loops, and you can create some interesting loops quickly. But your work moves around a bit. There's a bit more structure to it. How do you sequence more complicated pieces?
But mostly random. So random LFOs, random trig locks, all that sort of stuff. I'd say like the biggest sort of thing for me is sort of doing like track or kit per pattern. So this doesn't really apply quite as much to Octatrack, but more for like analog rhythm, analog 4, and the older machine drum and mono machine. You have 127 or whatever kits. So for the most part, you can kind of have one kit for every pattern, which that helps a lot because it sort of makes the bigger boxes work more like the smaller boxes like Syntact and Digatone, Digitact, where when you create a new pattern, it's for all intents and purposes making a new kit for that pattern, if that makes sense.
So it's not like parts or something on the Octatrack where you can change kits out, is it?
It's very similar.
Okay.
You would agree, right, Duncan? Parts are very. Why aren't you paying any attention to what I'm saying?
We're going deep.
I'm
We're getting into
saying-
parts.
Kit per part, per pattern, per part, per kit, per part.
So boring.
Like that. I heard. Sorry, I was watching things and trying to keep on top of.
This is
Yes,
why
I
the Ned
would
Rush
agree,
channel.
absolutely.
This is why the Ned Rush channel is going to soon become the Turismo Blue channel, because he sort of hangs around long enough to talk to everybody.
I'm very slowly planting seeds so that everyone can do my job better than I can. So I can just sit here and drink and do nothing. My next Octatrack video is going to be all about parts and resampling parts from one part to another. After I stumbled upon that a couple of weeks ago and then got very excited, I had a falling back in love with the box.
I think it's fair to say there's been some Octatrack obsessions over the last couple of weeks. I've fallen into that as well. I think you started it off. Some serious experimentation.
Yeah. I love it. It really changed. Like, I was actually able to kind of finish things on it. And I recorded like 20 or 30 minutes and sent it to Alex and Damien.
Yeah, that was sick.
And I was like, that's the most amount. Yeah, thanks. It's like the most amount of stuff. I think I made it to bank C. Like I've I've had it for like 7 years, I think, and I've never made it past bank A, or even like 4 patterns. But now I've kind of found this thing where I can kind of like start something and then know where I can take it. Whereas for a long time I was kind of like, I don't know where to go with this. I've got this really nice pattern, but I don't know where to go. And then when I sort of really understood parts and then sort of worked out that you could sample, you know, part 1 to part 2 using the recorded tracks and then going to a second part and reconfiguring all the machines to play what's just been recorded, I was like, oh my God. Like you can remix a pattern like back into itself. I don't know how to explain it, but I'll do a video on it soon. It's pretty exciting.
I have things to say about that.
Say it.
I think a lot of times people kind of approach hardware thinking like, all right, well, I have experience with a DAW, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I kind of get how things work, and you can make music really quickly on a DAW, blah, blah, blah. So when you go to something like essentially any box, whether it be Electron or, you know, Roland stuff, whatever it might be, I think people forget that you're doing the exact same thing as picking up a guitar. Like if you try to just pick up a guitar and start playing it, like you're going to have a bad time. Like it takes a long time to really learn how to play. And it's no different with any other box. And the more complicated and more capable that the box is, it's going to take that much more time. So it's sort of like, I think people get kind of down when they've had something for, you know, a month or two and aren't really getting anywhere with it, or, you know, kind of stuck just doing a loop sort of thing. It's no different than, you know, the first couple songs you learn to play on the piano or the guitar or whatever else. It's like, well, that's what I learned how to play and that sounds good. So I'll just kind of stay right here because I know how to do this sort of thing. And you forget that like it takes years to learn an actual instrument. So why wouldn't it take years to, you know, learn an electronic instrument the same way, even though the result is a little bit different. You know, you maybe not in real time playing the thing, but it's
You're
still
just
the
pressing
same
buttons, aren't
idea.
you? Aren't you just
Yeah.
pressing buttons?
Just press play.
This, yeah, this. I mean,
And
this
you-
is
and
what
then you
people
just
say
press
to you,
play.
don't they? Yeah. Oh, you're just twiddling knobs. Or
But I quite like the fact that you are just pressing play. I find quite a satisfying kind of like 2 fingers or middle finger to all the people who do say, oh, it's just pressing play. It's like,
That's
yeah, it is just pressing play. And there's a hell of a lot of work that goes into
Yeah.
that, the lead up to that point.
well, and that's why I'm such a fan of
Like a
that
fireworks display.
thing. Yeah.
It's a bit like that. You see those massive layouts of dominoes that someone must spend like a month setting up, and they flick the first domino and this whole pattern just unfolds in front of you.
Yes.
How long does it take to like program it all in, Gus, before you do that?
Really depends.
Forever.
No, it really doesn't. Like it depends on, you know, it's easier for me because like with glitch music, it's just inherently there's more freedom there to just hit, you know, live record into an Electron and just turn knobs at random. Something interesting will happen. It's just whether it's interesting enough to actually hit record or not. That's kind of where that comes in. But anywhere from I don't think I've ever spent more than 10 hours on one sequence. It's, you know, over the course of a couple days or whatever. I don't think I've ever, but usually I can do it in 3 to 4.
And would
One
that be a whole
sequence.
song?
Yeah, is that like a
Yeah.
whole, when you say one sequence, is that like the whole thing rather than one pattern?
One song, yeah.
Okay.
I think that sounds about
That's a healthy pace.
Do you get involved with the song modes or anything on the Electron? like the Octatrack, for example. It seems very powerful. I've not really used it, but
Yeah, the Octatrack I think has the best of all of them, because all of them are a little bit different. Like the way song mode on the tact boxes is a little bit different than the way it is on the analog rhythm and analog 4. It's a little bit different on the mono machine and machine drum, but I think the Octatrack is the best arranger of them all, for sure.
What about like actually like programming it? Because I'm quite aware of some of the interesting things it can do. Like it's not necessarily linear. You can tell it to say jump from one pattern to another pattern down here and then back up or whatever. But
Yeah,
you kind of have to dial it all in. Although you can just like select a pattern when you're in there. You can kind of go bank and then the pattern and then just punch it in. But in terms of dialing in all of these little things, like I want it to. What's the other thing as well? You can tell like a pattern to start like halfway through a pattern using the offset, which is kind of quite interesting. And then you could sort of adjust the length. So you could have like one pattern. You could have pattern A1 playing in its entirety, and then it could go to pattern A1 again, but it's only playing steps 2 to 4 or something, or 2 to 8, which is kind of quite interesting.
Yeah.
Which makes me think about Ableton in that sense of like you have like one clip, you duplicate it, and then you kind of select a region in that clip and then duplicate that, select another region, and you can jump to different regions in the clip. But when I've tried to do it, I found it a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
That's the sound I make when I'm in pain.
Clip that, ladies and gentlemen.
Don't clip him,
so-
no, never clip me.
No
Sorry, carry
clips allowed. User friendly. Are the sounds on this album from your sample pack that you put out a little while ago? Is that like some of the source material?
No, the source material is machine drum and mono machine. So it's exclusively those boxes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like any of the sounds in it will come from one of those two. They're basically digital synth voices and then processed through Octatrack. Yeah. Electron exclusive.
Electron
that
exclusive.
sounds like mad work. Yeah. So all the sounds are made from scratch for this album.
Well, machine drum has several different kits in it. Some
Mhm.
of them are technically they're samples that are baked into the machine drum. So I don't think it would quite be fair to say that they're made from scratch, but they all come from like those two boxes by themselves. Like I didn't bring anything out of a computer or any other piece of gear and introduce it into the tracks, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
you also mentioned the analog heat box. I don't understand that box. What is it? Could you sort of explain what it is and how you use it?
It's a distortion pedal for the most part. Like,
It's analog.
yeah.
Analog. Isn't there a compressor in there as well?
There's a faux compressor. Like you could approximate a compressor with the envelope follower and a couple other things, but there's not actually a compressor in there. It's the in the Mach 2, the Mach 2 FX. I'm not well versed in that, so I don't know. That might have a compressor built into it, but the one that I use does not. It has the distortion and a low high EQ and a filter.
Do you run it as an end of chain effect, or do you do something? Do you sequence it to do different things?
I have sequenced it. That's something that I haven't really tapped into as much as I should, because there's a lot of really interesting sound design potential with that. But for the most part, I'm using it as just, something to kind of add crunch. And I like the reason I do the CR 1604 into the analog heat into the FMR, none of them are really doing a whole lot. It's just a bunch of little steps to where each one is adding a little bit along the way. Yeah.
I always like your artwork, Gus, who does that on your Bandcamp and stuff for your releases.
This one I did. For this album I made that. The only artwork that isn't mine is APF7U.
Yeah,
That was
that's cool.
Yeah, that was the Detroit Underground release. That one I didn't make, but pretty much everything else I made. Not all of them.
You're kind of churning them out quite regularly, aren't you? Didn't you do one in like September?
I think the Detroit Underground one was August of last year.
Yeah.
I'm generally about one a year.
That's
Something
pretty good.
like that.
I'm like one every 5 years. Actually, Stephen has just joined us, as Nick, and we're all very excited because we've just finished a record. Whether or not we're going to talk about it or not, we don't know. But like,
Well, you brought it up, so now you have to.
I've been celebrating for the last few days because I'm very happy.
Have you been to bed?
Cheers. I've been to bed, but I've been staying up very late.
Yeah.
Listening to it in my chair like this.
Okay, then go on.
And do we want to talk about it, or do we want to
You
wait
have
till it's
to
out?
now.
The only thing I'll say is Nick was also involved and he was amazing. And if
Thank
any of
you.
you guys need to have your stuff mixed or mastered, you guys need to hire him.
It's true.
He's fantastic.
Nick.
Go to Nick.
Thank you, boys.
So is that what we're going to say about it?
Yeah,
we have two
like
album
plug it in
releases
if-
on one show. Perhaps we've had Gus has literally gone live with his album.
Oh, congratulations, by the way, user friendly.
Thank you.
Yeah, when is the release date and all that stuff? When can we hear it? How can we hear it?
We don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
We've got plans to. How should I put this? Get it out there. I don't know. We're still.
Post it on SoundCloud.
We're still. Yeah, we'll put it on Napster. I saw like a graph that like Napster is actually the one that pays the most per stream out of all the streaming services. Has anyone seen this graph?
Napster is something you can still get.
Well, I didn't even know that it was even like a streaming service now. I thought it was always like a file sharing thing. But I've seen this graph floating around Twitter, and it's the one that pays the most. And like I think like YouTube's the one that pays the least or something. And like Spotify isn't above YouTube. Let me see if I can find it. You talk amongst yourselves.
How does it feel, Stephen, having finished it?
I feel a little bit like a mother who just gave birth and has I'm exhausted right now. I didn't realize how tired I was.
You've got postnatal depression.
Yeah, a little bit. No, but it was I feel like I grew a lot and discovered a lot unexpectedly. It was a cool experience.
What were the highlights for you?
Working with Nick and Ned and just creating something I wouldn't have created by myself. Experimenting, using this piece of gear and that piece of gear and trying to get sounds, and I don't know. Nick has a lot of outboard gear, so it's fun exploring that. I don't know.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what was the general, like, I don't know how much you guys are going to talk about it or not, but like, what was the general process as far as how things were bounced back and forth? So, was it kind of coming up with some interesting chord progressions and you guys would share those back and forth? Was it, Duncan sending you some sort of awful break beat and then you would make it better? What was the general workflow? Because I assume this was done remotely.
You know, 3 different time zones.
3 time zones. This is my first Zoom album.
Oh, that's sick. That's cool.
I tell you, one of the songs was from one of the more Kicks and Friends, or Compressed Like an Idiot Zoom calls. Somebody said something about, or I think Duncan actually might have said it, that the Locrian mode is one of the useless modes. You can't write anything with that. It's just don't even bother.
Yes.
And so I took that as a challenge to write a song with it.
Nice.
But
and that was the first song, or that was like maybe one of the first ideas that we sort of sat down and sort of tried to get going off the back of that conversation, which was like, well, we've got to do it now because that's no one does the song in the locker room mode. Well, we've got to do it. And then that became a song. And then when we were getting close to the end, I think I put back in the guitar part, which was like the very first bit of like guitar that I maybe played. You were saying, just play something right now. And I did. And I was like, I don't know what to play in the locker room mode to make it sound good. And then, yeah, and then it kind of made its way in there really quite like sort of towards the end. So there was a nice sort of full circle there. Because for a while we had all these ideas, but then we didn't do anything with them. And then suddenly we had a little break, and then you just sent me loads of stuff, which is pretty much all the songs.
So I guess to answer your question is, it was just it was snippet of idea snippets, and then like we just worked on them independently and then sent them back and forth. And then when Nick got involved, we sent him the Ableton sessions, and we used Dropbox to go back and forth to send everything. So anytime Nick would do something, to get updated in the Dropbox folder, and anybody could access it.
So you would sort of multi-track a song, send that to Duncan. Duncan would do his thing with it, maybe send it back to you. You might make some changes, and then Nick got involved. And
yeah, so we'd written the songs, and then once they were done, are like, I'm not gonna be able to mix this. And Duncan's like, well, I'm like, let's see if Nick would want to do this. And then that's when, but yeah, as far as the songwriting goes, it was back and forth. And then we'd have Zoom calls where actually it's not just back and forth. I forget when it got to a certain point. I think there was also some sessions too where we were on Zoom and we'd share the screen, maybe if Duncan's Ableton screen, and we'd work on the song together like that too.
a lot of times it seems like when you're working with a mix engineer, it's kind of, this is the sound we want. This is what we're going for. We want it to sound this exact way. And then other times it's sort of, mixing engineers given some sort of, creative liberties. As far as that, like creative liberty, how much was Nick given?
Well, Nick is
Quite a bit, I think.
Nick likes to talk. Let's see what Nick would say to that.
Yeah, I didn't want to do this. They threatened me and made me, so.
And we bribed you with like free vodka.
Yeah, well, at first I don't think there were any liberties. It was like, did you silence the drum in the small 1 second part? Yeah, I did. Well, put it back.
That was right early on. I was like, what's he done?
He could tell, and he was mad.
As I've been listening to these songs, like, for hundreds of hours every week for about 9 months. And I was like, don't think you can sneak these things past me. It's just that tiny. There was like one muted snare. I was like, don't mute that snare. Put it back.
Yeah, but at some point I was politely offering, like, I have a bunch of like stuff laying around that not being used. Like, should we kind of try to get it involved as well? I don't think it was met with any enthusiasm. It was like, oh, the album is ready, just don't bother. And then we spent dozens of hours, dozens literally, on calls with Steven to mix it in and like, oh, I have this idea, I have this idea. And it ended up being quite a lot of time, like mixing new stuff in, a lot of changes to tracks, to songs, that all my small changes to snares mean really nothing in comparison with
That's a fair
what
point.
actually happened later.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose that, like at the point when we did send it to you, I was a little bit like, yeah, no, it's done, and it didn't really even enter my mind that it was like, actually, no, it's not at all. There's still there's still loads more space for stuff to happen.
Yeah, and loads more things were taken out as well. It wasn't cut in stone as well.
Yeah, but it sounds great. I listened to it when did we have it was Tuesday, wasn't it? Was it Tuesday?
Yeah, just a couple of days ago.
I listened to it afterwards and I enjoyed it very much. I'm very happy.
How many tracks is it?
9 tracks.
Nice.
It clocks in at about 40 minutes.
Alan and Dan also played on it. You got Alan to do a guitar solo.
We've got guest appearances from
and Dan did an organ solo.
It was all quite mysterious. It was back at the beginning of the year. It was a bit like the D-Day landings. Like no one kind of knew what was going on. You just had a bit to do. You turn up. So I did a couple of solos, and then I think you sent me Dan's organ pieces first. I didn't know what was going on, and it was I like the mystery, but you certainly did that.
The song at that point hadn't really been arranged. It was just a couple of loops.
Yeah.
But the rhythm section, so they were just kind of two kind of super loops, as it were, but there was no arrangement. And so in some ways we kind of arranged the song around those, like around your takes. Because, well, at least for me, when I went in, I was like, okay, well, we'll have one here, then we'll have one here, then we'll do that. And then that started to form the overall piece. And then we would add other bits in along the way and then decide this is the main part and all this sort of stuff. But when we sent them to you, there was nothing, which I found quite helpful because it helped a lot in us trying to shape the ideas of what the thing was actually going to turn out to be. Because otherwise it would have just been a pair of loops. So those two solos definitely pushed us in a direction to think about, like, how is this going to go? What's going to happen?
Definitely interesting having heard the final result. And I know it went through lots of, there's a massive gap before when I heard like what I sent you. And then what came back was something completely different in terms of this enormous sounding piece of music. Like,
I wonder which version you heard too, because it's liable to have changed since whatever version you heard. Because literally things changed up to the last day we were working on it. Like that was when like nothing was safe.
Probably the last one I heard was maybe 3 weeks ago. It depends when Duncan's drunk, he might send me a version of it occasionally, like about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I go, "Oh, thanks."
Every day then, was it?
when I was there was a period between sort of November to January. It was kind of winter really, where I was just literally living in these songs, like every other day. I was just sort of, and sometimes I would do really long sessions, and I wouldn't even be doing anything. I would just be listening to them, just trying to think about what to do and what needs to be done or whatever.
I feel like there's also kind of like 4 main influences that we're like imagining combining as Radiohead, David Bowie, Square Pusher, and Talking Heads, and like what would happen if you put all them together.
And a bit of John Barry.
Oh yes, of course, John Barry. It's like one song that started off being kind of like an imaginary James Bond theme. Or what would happen if we call ourselves Resolveless, by the way. So Resolveless did a James Bond theme.
Was this James Bond theme? Was that the one that did you try and do James Bond John Barry with the locker room mode.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It was
I gonna say
kind
that.
of like
I need to hear that.
No, that one's called From the Stars.
what kind of happened was like when we were starting, like Stephen was asking me what kind of music do you like, and I was like, I don't know. I like Square Pusher, and I like John Barry, and I think Stephen was like, I don't know who that is. So I sort of sent him stuff like the Ipcris File, you know, his 1960s kind of spy music, and I was like, you know, I really like what he used to do with the dulcimer, you know, the hammer dulcimer. And then there was a bit of a gap, and then Stephen sent me back all these ideas with like dulcimer in them, and I was like, right, that's it, I'm off. And it just sort of set me off, and I just started putting drums in, and so that was good. That was inspiring. That was an inspired move, Stephen.
Yeah, dulcimer still.
So if you want to work with
Right.
Duncan, you got to put a dulcimer in your track.
What were you using for the dulcimer, Stephen? Was it a real dulcimer?
No, it wasn't a real dulcimer. It was I think UVI, something off of Falcon or something. One of their sounds.
Mm-hmm.
There's one in Ableton I use, which I think is called like New Age or something, like New Age String. But I was actually in a shop the other day and I saw a dulcimer, and I was actually it was like used and very old. I was quite tempted to pick it up, but even though it was £300, they had a brand new one above it that was £800. I was like, God, these things aren't cheap.
They're pretty big, aren't they? You have to play them stood up.
They're not. They can get quite big.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a small billiard table.
Yeah.
Type size, and yeah, you have to play them standing up and then they've got pedals and stuff, but they sound so good. They're kind of a big mandolin, I suppose.
You get them a lot in Indian music as well, in Indian classical music.
Yeah,
sound really.
You can kind of bounce the string, so it kind of goes ding 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 ding, and like I'd imagine like kind of putting, because it's like 3 strings per note, isn't it? Or 2 strings per note, a bit like a mandolin. So you could put one slightly out of tune, I think. And yeah, they're really good. Sometimes I think guitars are so boring.
That why you've taken up the violin, I've noticed this week.
No, that was a Christmas present my family got for my mother last Christmas. But it needs a lot of work. So I took it to a shop to get it set up and restrung and all that sort of stuff. But I had a quick go on it.
So your mother plays the violin?
She doesn't play. She's always sort of said that she played when she was a child, and she was kind of offered this she was offered this very good sort of like opportunity to take this scholarship because of how good she was, but she turned it down because she was just, the idea of performing in front of other people just terrified her. And so she's always been a little bit kind of like, oh, I wish I, maybe a little bit of regret there, but she's too inherently shy to perform in front of people. So my family bought her they found this violin in a charity shop and bought it for her. And sure enough, she took it out and she knew what to do, but it was out of tune. The strings were fucked and the bow was broken. And so I've taken it to a shop to get it set up and playable. And then we'll really see how good she is. After 75 years, probably.
You're gonna start a duo with her and go to electronic music open mic.
We're gonna be like Stefan Grappelli and Django Reinhardt. We're gonna play like gypsy jazz stuff.
Do covers that are user friendly.
And then we'll give them to Gus to do remixes. I found the image of the streaming rates. Everyone see that? This is the image I saw on Twitter. I don't know how reliable that is. Can everyone see that?
Pretty good.
I didn't even know that Napster was even a streaming service now. So
it looks horrendous. Actually, you get like less than a penny or almost.
Oh,
There's
for
women,
Napster,
not even none of them.
Napster,
are
you
a
get
penny.
almost 2.
I'm sorry, I thought it was almost 2 pennies, but that's actually 0.019, not 0.19.
that's not even a penny.
Yeah.
Oh,
For every
wow.
100 streams, you get 2p, or 2 cents.
That's horrible.
Yeah, it's I've never.
Can you imagine
had
going to a
payout
job
on
where
Spotify.
you were making like $20 an hour, and then all of a sudden it gets switched to like 0.02 cents an hour?
I think you're better off on Bandcamp and things like that, where people still seem happy to pay, a fixed amount for a release.
Is it Spotify being flooded with AI music? I think, aren't they encouraging or developing that themselves so they can have their own self-gen music? It's like, yeah,
You don't have to pay anybody.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Sounds
if
like
those
hell,
days are on
though,
the
doesn't it?
horizon. It makes a lot of sense. Why pay musicians when you can just tell the computer to do it, and then you can upload it, and then people in their cafes can have their mellow jazz piano playlists playing in their, boutique cafes in the background, and because that's probably largely what Spotify is. That's probably largely Spotify's demographic is people putting stuff on in shops or in pubs or cafes or whatever. Like, it's maybe not for the serious music fan who probably wants to collect.
You guys know
things.
Venus Theory at all?
I've watched a
Yeah.
bit of it. Yeah.
He put out a video recently about streaming and how like a lot of musicians, if they're playing that game, they end up having to all kind of sound the same because they're trying to get on playlists. And like to get on a playlist, you have to have a certain sound. And if you don't have that sound, a lot of the people won't put you on the playlist. So a lot of people who do streaming don't even end up doing stuff they really want to do. I don't know. It was an interesting video. If you check it out, if you get a chance.
Surely with like the right bit of, with the right marketing and a decent marketing budget, then you can get people to listen to your stuff over and over and over again in order to potentially generate the return or whatever. But otherwise it's kind of, I mean, anyone can put something like on the internet now, which is really great, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't tell anyone that it's there. And that's the real like hard bit. So
I think you have to get like millions of streams really to make any kind of considerable income from it. Like Bandcamp, it seems to be the better way to go to actually make money from releases.
How do you go about promoting, or how do people find out about it?
Like for me, I mean, so it can have like labels help, don't they? They've got their own audience, and that's more of an. I suppose it depends what you want, doesn't it? If you're after, if it's an audience development thing, and you just want exposure and for people to know your name, then which is as valid a reason to release music as plays and income is, I think. To grow an audience for people to know who you are, then labels and streaming platforms and getting onto playlists that really helps. And like I've had some of my tunes just picked up by playlists because like contemporary jungle or things like this. You can see it all on Spotify. Things get added to playlists.
Did you proactively do that, or did somebody just kind of stumble upon yours?
Yeah. Like either they picked it up through the label or the distributor. They get like there's contemporary jungle, modern jungle, drum and bass playlists and things like this, and and sometimes there's a few DJs who've added my stuff to their playlists, and they seem to get a lot of traction as well. But I think like because Duncan's got like this YouTube audience, and that's a great place to kind of advertise a Bandcamp release. That if you haven't got the backing of label for a self-release, you've done that a few times, Duncan, haven't you? Like with your Bandcamp stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of makes sense because that's where the most amount of numbers are.
Yeah.
Even though the engagement is not predictable,
Mm-hmm.
and probably only a small percentage of the total number, as it were.
Mm.
46,000 subscribers doesn't mean 46,000 views when I
No.
upload something.
No, it's probably like 80-20. You know, if you put an album out and really promote it where your audience is, then, you know, it's probably 20% of people might go and play it. And maybe a similar fraction of that number will buy it or part with cash for it. But it trickles in over time as well, depending on how you promote it, you know.
I'm curious about the playlist. When you're on a playlist, do you feel you expand your audience, or are people listening to the playlist and not really paying attention to who is on? It's just like a sound that they're after, and like it doesn't really matter who's on it? Or do people end up like, oh, wait a minute, I got to go find out who Human Synthetics is?
I think a small percentage. Oh, sorry to cut you off. Alex.
No, carry on, man. Yeah,
I think a small percentage people actually check you out. I think, you know, it's really good for getting a lot of plays, and then your music's going to be recommended more because there's just more people listening to your stuff. Now, let's say you get like 2,000 plays off of some playlist. You might get like 20 people that actually come check out your profile and then listen to your other songs and decide to follow you, which is more than nothing. But I think the more the benefit there is that 2,000 people played your song. Was it probably in the background? Yeah, but you know, you're just kind of building steps.
Yeah.
And then you've got more songs getting, you know, 2,000 plays, 20 more people coming to check out your stuff.
It's like magnet, not bomb. You know, building up things over time and attracting an audience to you and engaging with them regularly, rather than the kind of old marketing method of, we got this big thing, and then you know, and like the benefit of Duncan's audience, and a lot of people know you, Stephen, as well, from More Kicks and from stuff like this, that you've already got traction out there. People know who you are, people know your personalities, you know. And I you know, personally, I would want to park cash with it, because I know you guys, and there's it's the same for everyone that watches this stream now and watches Duncan's videos and has listened to his music before. So yeah. But the playlist thing, there are places you can submit it, but
yeah,
there's quite an interesting, I can imagine that there's an interesting sort of mechanic there, in the same way that there kind of is perhaps for like music journalists, where people who are compiling the playlists, and let's say that they're kind of the tastemakers, they're going to need stuff to constantly add to their playlists, because otherwise they're going to lose their followers and their relevance and their traction. So they need stuff. So it's almost kind of like, not that I'm saying that they would take anything, but like they're just as much
exactly
like
what he's saying.
They're just as much like they need like content, like as much as like we need people to hear it. So,
absolutely.
And the same for sort of like journalists as well, who are kind of reviewing things. Like if there's nothing to review, then they can't review anything and they don't get any work. So there seems to be like a kind of relationship there that kind of sort of works in everyone's favor.
You should do it.
It's like Helmore Radio. Is that the other guy that he does a kind of a DJ thing with and he seeks out a load of stuff, doesn't he? Like from, is that the guy we met over at
I met
Kieran,
him we met him in Oxford. Yeah. No, I haven't listened to he was like interviewing a lot of people and then sort of segueing it into his DJ shows. But I haven't seen much from him recently.
I listened to his feed a couple of times. He had quite a eclectic mix of stuff, actually. He's not sticking to like one type of music or anything like that. It's quite a good approach.
Have any of you guys explore internet radio at all? Getting played on internet radio?
Well, me and Alex I'm trying to get Alex to get us a spot on Jungle Train.
Yes. Yeah. No, like I've had some of my tunes played on mixes on there before.
We got to do a show on there though. We got to do a show.
I'll follow up on that.
We'll do like two Ableton. We'll do back-to-back Ableton somehow. 2 laptops into a DJ mix or something, and we'll just we got to do it.
Okay, so we've been talking about internet radio and other internet things. There's a question from the chat. What is the value of building a local audience, i.e. gigs?
Depends where you live.
I think it's that
100%.
it's
you
that
live
in
at
real life network of people who can give you feedback about your music, you know.
or people, yeah. I mean, so if you're kind of like, I'm speaking hypothetically, if you're like an emerging artist and you're pulling in a lot of people in your local area, and you so happen to live in an area where there's lots of activity, let's say Bristol, Berlin, London, Los Angeles, you know, places that have got very vibrant, rich music scenes, and like, you know, you can pull in like 200 people purely on word of mouth, then that's like pretty good. I mean, where I am in Southampton, where there's nothing, then it would kind of be pointless.
I think like I always look to like the Cornwall scene, you know, like Aphex and Luke Vibert and all these people, you know, and that was like completely incubated away from popular places like London and all these bits, and it came, you know, they all knew each other and performed and did things together. And
it was a free party thing as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
There was
like a free party rave scene.
And yeah, they weren't part of anything. They didn't know what was going on in London. But they must have
always
gone
think
there
like
at some point.
Yeah, they did like, didn't they get it's a bit like they got second, you know, Chinese whispers or things from, you know, coming from piecemeal bits of information coming through that, and so they didn't have the full facts, they got the occasional record coming in, and they kind of made up their own music around these bits of this and bits of that, bits of acid, bits of jungle, bits.
But also, wasn't Reflex like set up like quite early on in the early 90s, and then they were sending records into London record shops, even though they were still, I don't know much about the law
the law of the
IDM
Cornwall
law.
scene. But that's like the benefit of a small local scene, and like if nothing exists, start it yourself, you know, and be the thing, be the night, do the night yourself.
This kind of feels a little bit like that.
Pre-internet sort of behaviors, because early 90s, like there wouldn't have been a way of, so you've got what's around you, but you don't really have, so in a way that type of thing would have been common maybe 30 years ago, and obviously we've lost some of that, but we've replaced it with something else. Like I guess,
like you said, Alan, this kind of feels like a uniting of the bedroom producers. Like,
yeah, I mean the More Kicks Than Friends is a kind of a community, is I guess the modern equivalent of that.
That's why we're going to make an awesome compilation, and we're going to release it on the More Kicks Than Friends label, which I might set up one day.
Set it up
Definitely
today.
set up a label. Yeah.
I
Fine Lonely.
want to have some, yeah. Or no, we'll release it on mini disc.
Yeah, USB only.
The mini disc only.
Are you going to get anyone to remix any of those tracks?
are you up for it?
We've had conversations about it, yeah.
Because then you could put it on Beatport as well. I mean, you could do that anyway, but if you did like a club version,
I would love to have like the community like take a track and do it. Like, so if any of you guys are interested,
you could put all the stems up and do a remix comp or something.
You're probably going to do it anyway, because we're just going to give them to you and ask you to do it.
Yeah, I'm definitely up for that. Saying that on live on the internet. Yeah,
we got you on tape now.
Yeah.
I think
You've
everyone
kind of
here
made
is, isn't they? You got like surely Damien and Gus should do one. They're gonna.
Would love to have you guys if you're interested.
They're going to do it. It's not a question of whether they're interested.
I was asking that because I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Do you remember, Stephen, we had a conversation, which I'm still quite interested in, about like the TikTok thing. Remember we talked about TikTok and like how like there's maybe a way in there of like, if you can get like your song on TikTok so that it's available to be used in like a video.
Oh yeah, if like somebody like made a dance video out of like 20 seconds of your thing or a minute of your thing,
like
then other people could go like other people start copying it, and like you got all these people doing.
That's got to be like really, really, really good for a song. Like I don't follow that side of TikTok a huge amount, but I know that my niece
I
does.
think like Fleetwood Mac or something, like somebody was skateboarding to one of their like Dreams or something, one of their songs, and it became like a viral hit all over again.
Yeah.
There's
random
also
stuff
like
that.
when like you take a song and just slow it down, it seems like often that'll kind of, for whatever
speed it up.
reason, yeah,
thing?
it really takes off because it's
Vaporwave.
already just yeah.
That's mad.
Well, but also I don't think it's that surprising, just because a lot of songs sound, I think, so much better when they're slowed way down.
Indeed, I agree. All right, I don't want to talk about TikTok anymore. Comments from the chat.
Why not?
But
Shut
we've
up.
got chat action.
Chat's more important than you.
Remember, Duncan, this is not your channel anymore. This is Damien's now.
More chat than friends.
This is
Put
my
the fruits
show.
in the chat. Put the fruits in the chat.
All right. DJ John God says building a local audience is nice. You get to bump into people that recognize you once in a while and get to have a beer with them. Yes, that is awesome.
Yep.
There's another question, but I just want to mention Diary mentioned there seems to be a local scene in Dublin, but as an aging producer, it feels like a young person's game. Do you find it similar in your locations? Are we too old? First off, no. Second, I'm not old, so I really can't speak to this. Ned, how do you feel about this?
What was the question?
What? Yeah, what was the question? I was slightly distracted by.
Read it. You just read it from the chat, buddy.
There seems. Oh God, put my bloody glasses on.
This is getting clips, man. This is getting clipped for TikTok.
There seems to be a local scene in Dublin, but as an aging producer, it feels like a young person's game. Do you find it similar in your locations? Are we too old? No, not at all.
Never.
No, I'm in my prime. Harrison Ford did all his best movies in his 40s.
I love seeing a mix of ages at club nights and stuff like that, which you get in for a lot.
I used to go to things in my 20s, and I'd see people in my 40s back then, in their 40s back then, and I just used to think that was normal.
Yeah.
You know?
At one point, I think Samuel Jackson was like the highest paid actor, done the most things, or had some stat. It was crazy, and he didn't start till like he was in his 50s.
Yeah, he was like, I think in Pulp Fiction, or even Jurassic Park, I think he was in his late 30s. Or like maybe
I didn't realize he had done stuff before Pulp Fiction. That's the first time I really heard about him.
The only things I know him for before Pulp Fiction was Coming to America and Jurassic Park, where he was he had a very small part. He wasn't like in Pulp Fiction, he's obviously like one of the head actors. But yeah, he was in his 40s, I think, by that point. So
there's actually at one point it felt like there was a bunch of older people who were there's like a resurgence, like. Do you guys remember a movie called Sugar Man or Searching for Sugar Man or something?
Yeah,
like that?
that's great. That's great.
No, I don't.
Like Robert
the
Rodriguez.
artist. Yeah, he's brilliant.
Yeah, there's this guy who was from Detroit, and he in America, for those who don't know. But he became like a huge hit in like South Africa or something like that. And like he was like as big as Elvis, but he was like a mystery because nobody knew what happened to him. And then when the internet came around, people were able to research and they discovered he's still alive. And so this guy made a film about what happened. And then after the film, which became a hit, and it was also, I think it was filmed only on an iPhone. He had a whole career after, and he actually came over to South Africa and did a concert that was sold out. There's a band from Detroit again, actually, a all black punk rock band called Death. They did a documentary on them, had a career. Then there's this older singer called Susan something or another. I think she was on like one in Simon Cowell's shows. I can't, maybe it's called The X Factor or something like that. I don't watch any of those shows, but she sang
Susan Boyle.
Susan Boyle.
Yeah. She sang on that, and she was like up there in age, and like she had a career
Great voice.
Charles Bradley, he was like a James Brown impersonator for the longest time. Then he ended up having a career much later in life. I don't think he put out his first album until he's like in his 70s. He died soon after, but he got to enjoy a career after. Sharon Dapp and the Dap Kings. She was older, had a career. She passed away recently. I think some of these people passed away in 2016, where like a bunch of people had passed away that year. David Bowie, Prince, George Michael's, like just like a lot of people died that year. So I think she died that year. But anyway, this is all in reference to Are You Too Old? I'm just, and there's a lot of examples that maybe they don't get like the screen time like Britney Spears does or something like that, but like there's people out there doing it at all ages.
Also,
Exactly.
I think it's important to remember, like, even outside of music, like take actors, somebody like Bryan Cranston, for example. Like he was he was kind of starting to get pretty old when he was really, like, he was in Malcolm in the Middle. It seemed like that was when he really sort of took off. But like still, like, even though it's not music, it's still the same thing. Like it's all art, and there's going to be a combination of, you have finally reached the age where you're really starting to kind of get things locked down, but also it could be that you, like, to some extent there is a bit of luck involved with being discovered one way or the other, and it may just be that that lucky break doesn't come until you're 40, and there's nothing you can do about that one way or the other. Like maybe the lucky break just never happens, even if you're the, best musician or artist ever. You may just not get that, whatever that lucky thing is that happens, whether it be meeting somebody at a live show or, whatever else. But yeah, I wanted to mention that, if you're looking for examples, it doesn't have to be restrained just to music, just because what you do is music. It can be all art.
Well, speaking of which, was it true that Vincent van Gogh didn't see any
never made
success in life?
No.
Can you imagine? Like he had no idea.
He died quite young as well, didn't he? Killed himself quite young, I think.
H.P. Lovecraft is another one. Like his stuff was basically looked at as garbage until much, much later on. Which he was kind of a bad person, but still, same thing applies.
All right. So to go back to the original question, no, you're not too old. Don't be afraid to mix it up with the younger crowd. They need the experience. You could use the inspiration. Next question.
Yes.
How do you guys decide when a song is finished? I'm having a hard time with this, and many times I go on an endless loop of revisiting songs and trying to change them, etc.
Very good question. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So Gus mentioned earlier he only spends about 10 hours making a whole sequence and or / song. Give yourself a time limit that you can work on something. Like I've heard 20 hours. If you can't get the song done in 20 hours, stop working on it, scrap it for parts. If you get a really good bass line in there, save that to something else, or like whatever work you did that might be worth saving again, save that and then move on to something else. I think the best stuff happens when it comes quick. If you're spending too many times making too many small decisions, it becomes overcooked. So either just decide on something and be okay with your decisions, or give yourself like a time limit. If you can't get it done in that time limit, move on to something else.
I would jump off on that and say that it also really depends on the type of music you're making.
Yeah,
so
true.
Like if you're, doing something like I don't even know what the examples would be, but like just at least for me with Glitch, like by the nature of the music, like it's very easy. Like you could basically make a track in about a minute and a half. Like if you have the material and you have, the effects or whatever it is that you want to do with it. I was actually just joking around with a friend the other day. I have and I was talking to you about this as well, Duncan, that I have all of these sample chains and I was going through listening to them, and a lot of them, it was like, this nearly sounds like a track. It wasn't made to be a track. It was supposed to be a sample chain to put into a sampler, but it nearly sounds like a track. I could probably release this. So I don't think that it's a good idea to focus too much one way or the other on how long you're messing with something. Like if you think it's done, jump on that really quick, because as soon as you give yourself a little bit of time, that thought may fade away and you may think, well, maybe I could do something, but Like if you have that sort of gut feeling of like, this could be done, it's probably done.
Mhm.
That's all I have.
I think sorry Stephen, you go.
No, go ahead. I'll wait.
Yeah, mine's like mine's quite quick, and that is that in order to get better at finishing music, you have to finish music, and a lot of producers go through exactly what's been described there. In fact, it's kind of a rite of passage. You have to go through this years of the loop phase before you eventually find breakthroughs to get out of it. But like the more kind of crap music that you finish that is just done to a basic level will allow you to get better at actually finishing music and being in the headspace of finishing stuff. Because I think it's almost like a mindset game, isn't it? Really, a bit like what you said, Gus. That like if you think it's done, it's probably done. But like the more tunes you finish, the better you get at finishing them. And in order to finish them, you kind of just you have to finish them. You have to say like, when is something finished? Really? No, like there's always stuff you could do to it.
Make finishing songs the habit, not the habit of overproducing or like getting everything perfect. Get in the habit of finishing stuff, and then as you're finished pumping out a bunch of tracks, then you can start to make them better. It's going to serve you way better. Stephen, you were going to say something?
Stephen, go Stephen.
I guess I have maybe a unique take on this. I think if you ask somebody a question kind of like this, you're going to get everybody's opinion on it. And so you take what you like, leave the rest. And everybody's right and everybody's maybe not right. It just depends on how you want to go about it. I've seen people who they like to write a bunch of songs, and sometimes they can form the habit of never finishing any songs because they just end up getting to the point where in the same kind of point in the song where they get frustrated with it, and then they stop and like, oh, this isn't working. So then they go to another one, and all they do is they just create the habit of doing that same thing, at least from what I've seen. Whereas sometimes if you're just starting out, I guess I have a little bit different perspective. I feel like if you can stick with one idea and make it really good, you're going to learn a whole lot from going through the hard parts of trying to finish it, as opposed to forming the habit of stopping. But it just really depends on what's right for you, because maybe something I'm saying to you isn't right for you, but maybe part of what I'm saying is right to you. I've done it both ways personally, is where sometimes stuff comes quickly to me and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes things that I thought weren't going to work and I stuck with them. It took me a long time to get to it, but and I had to go through a lot of revisions on it. So it really depends on what kind of music you're doing, I suppose, as well. I know that there's some painters too that I don't know a lot about painting, but somebody told me like sometimes they'll project like a painting onto a wall and then they'll like trace the painting that way, and then they'll take it away and then they'll do stuff from there. So maybe if you relate that to music, maybe something that could help you finishing a song is to take somebody else's song and put it in your DAW and kind of and see what you like about, not to copy it, but to like see. Yeah,
top tip. This is top tip.
Yeah, like look for like the like if you want a certain kind of production on your track, like find out when, because a lot of music has to do with when something happens and where something happens and how something happens. And if you have something that you like, look at, like, learn from somebody who's further along than you. How did they finish the song? Because obviously there's a beginning and ending to that recording, because it's a 0 point and then it's the end of point. So look at what's happening in their music and take a free lesson. I'm not suggesting you rip it off. There's definitely a difference between ripping something up. Like what I'm talking about is like, oh, when did the drums come in? Or is there a string section used here? Or is like, what kind of beat is used here? And then like, go do your own thing.
That's a great.
Can I if I could just comment on,
Fine. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Something just as far as what Stephen was saying, as far as getting frustrated with something or maybe even getting bored with something, I also think it is really important to remember to like, all right, you're starting to get frustrated. When was the last time you ate something? When was the last time you drank a glass of water? When was the last time you like went for a walk or something like that? Like, it can be really easy to sort of find yourself starting to get frustrated, thinking that it's the whatever it is that you're working on, when actually it's just that you need to eat something. Like you're getting
You go touch
hangry.
grass.
Yeah. That was all.
Alan, what do you
Yeah.
think?
I was going to ask Alan.
I certainly understand the trap of creating lots of start points. I think Alex said that, like everyone goes through that. I mean, my approach is I don't really make songs as such. Mine are more like jams, what I do, and I tend to then string together the jams that I've got. But the thing that helps me move forward is really having a deadline. That's probably the most useful thing. I mean, give you a little bit of context there. I originally got to meet Duncan for this reason, like on his channel, because I was going through a phase when I was making some music. I used to make music a long time ago in bands, and that was a different experience, like more like a traditional band. I used to play the guitar in a band, and that had the dynamic of working together with other people, and things kind of moved along. It was fine, and then when I started making music on my own and electronic music, I fell into the rut that everybody else does. I started making lots of tracks and not finishing them, but liking bits about them, and then tend to labor them too much. I do think sometimes things are quick. You get some of the best things just happen real quick, almost, in an hour or two. But I mean, the direction I've taken though is more improvisational. I'm quite interested in improvisational playing and like stuff that's like jazz style stuff things. So I'm trying to take that direction. So which really means you have like a type of head with some kind of melody, and then you come back to that, and then you kind of make up a load of shit in between jam. So that's probably the way I'm going to progress, certainly for the foreseeable future. So they're not really.
That's how I start all my ideas as well, is like jams. They'll all be quite free form jams with very basic clips in Ableton. I like that kind of performance approach, because then there's an arrangement already there to work with, rather than ever being in that loop stage, really.
I think the other thing that's interesting, and Alex, I think you probably articulated this the best, but if you record a lot of things, like I jam a lot of stuff, and that might be on like a guitar, it might be on like a synthesizer or modular particularly, and I record a lot of things, and then I forget about them, and I find them like 6 months later, and then you forget, and you've made them, and then you can listen to them more objectively, and actually sometimes they're the beginning of something. I think Alex, you've talked about that sort of thing.
Like kind of like like just writing loads and loads of ideas, even, and like having a loop like that, like what is it, Heicher or something like that, having a loop. We all know the kind of situation, and just kind of exporting that and forgetting about it, and doing loads of those loops, and then just listening back to them, and away from the door or from Ableton, making notes about how you kind of what Stephen was talking about there, about maybe from your favorite tracks, ideas you could try, things you could steal from your favorite music that you could apply to that loop, making a little action list, opening the session up and doing those things, rather than going straight into listen to that loop and you're back in you're back in the loop again in the door. You're back in the loop, man. Yeah, stuck in the loop again. So you've got like these actions that you can even, what I try and do sometimes is like do them without listening to the thing. So I'll just arrange everything and then export that again, rather than constantly looping the thing back like over and over. That comes later in the finishing stage, where you do have to listen to a lot of stuff. You do have to listen to it a lot of times, but again, it depends on what you're making, doesn't it? Because if it's like something raw, then it doesn't necessarily matter. But if depends what kind of sheen you want in your production, what how, you know, the finish you want to apply to it. But writing loads of ideas definitely helps. Picking your favorites.
I know on your channel, Alex, you talk a lot about this motivational stuff, but I think that stepping away and then reevaluating that part coming, you talk about a lot on your channel. And I think I certainly found that inspiring, because it's much easier to listen to other people's music and pick out things that you like. It's really hard if it's something that's fresh in your mind that you've made to listen to it objectively.
That's what that's what happens when you naturally, when you give it so much time. I think like you know, if you wrote 100 ideas over however many days, even if they're really basic like 8-bar loops, and exported them all, you wouldn't remember all of them, you know, and you kind of you stumble on these things, and it's quite surprising because you don't. And I'm sure people, I'm sure you'll all appreciate this as well. Like, as we're talking about finishing albums, there'll be some stuff on your albums, I'm sure it's the same for you, Duncan and Stephen and Gus, and Damien will have experienced this, where you're like, you can't even remember writing the music necessarily, like how it all came together. It was like there was like some mysticism behind it. It's like even if it was like 10 hours programming patterns in on boxes, like there was like a magic to it. I'm not saying that, but like I don't quite know.
I've heard that called like a flow of consciousness.
Yeah, like getting
which is
the
a
flow
little
state.
bit like going in. Yeah, you go into a trance almost, and you're sort of not really thinking about like the repercussions of things. You're just doing things and doing it and making decisions. Go.
Yeah.
And then you sort of, and then you get tired, and then you go away, and then you come back, and like it's either really good or it's awful.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of go, oh my God, what was I thinking doing all of this stuff? But that is kind of what you were thinking, is what was I thinking? Because maybe you weren't, you were just kind of doing it.
It brings up that whole listening to your own thing. I think there's definitely like there has to be something in the loops you're making that catches your ear, because you can make a lot of sounds quite easily, different methods. But something has to jump out even to you. And it's what I found interesting is all the music you listen to, you're comparing it to other things you've listened to in some way. There's no such, even you're making experimental sounds, everything is in relation to something else that you've listened to or that's influenced you. And it's trying to work out, but if something jumps out to you from your own sound, then there's got to be something in that. There must be something to that that's worth taking a bit further. Otherwise, you can make an hour's worth of music and maybe 30 seconds jumps out. And I find that fascinating, how that works.
Like Stephen touched on it as well when he said about there'll be things that you think they weren't going to go anywhere, and then you could give that same idea 30 days, a month's break or something, and come back to it, and like your chances are you could probably see a way forward with it.
That's interesting. This interesting part of music is like how you feel changes. So like how the music will sound, because like if you think about what music kind of is, like freezing emotions in a way. So if your emotions aren't in alignment with whatever you're listening to, it might not appeal to you. But then 6 months later, your emotions are in a different place. You listen to, like, this is the greatest thing ever, or the opposite.
Well, actually, earlier today, before we came on this call, I listened to Gus's new album, and the two tracks that I picked up on first, he was close to binning off. Is that right? Like you weren't sure about those two, and they're the ones that I heard, and they caught my ear. And it's actually an interesting piece of work, because I've since moved on to a couple of other tracks. I listened to the album sort of nearly twice over. But what you're about to throw away is the first thing that caught my ear.
You know, I'd also say the same thing for other people's music. Have you ever listened to an album and been like, I'm not into this? Yeah. And then later on you listen to it, and it's like the album didn't change, but all of a sudden it's your favorite album ever.
All the time.
Right?
Context
I think it's because
so important.
Yeah. Yep. I feel, for me, I think it's because my emotional state changes, because the album didn't. And so whatever emotions were frozen on that album at that time, it needed to wait for my emotions to line up with it, I guess. Were you saying
that goes the other way too. Like you listen to something and are absolutely infatuated with it, and you come back to it later, and it's like, this is straight garbage.
Yeah,
Just
when you when
saying.
you
That happens to me
when
all
you
the
go
time.
to bed, you're like you listen to an idea and you're like, this is the best thing I've ever done, and then you listen back to it in the morning and it's, why did I think that?
happens- that-
Why did I
Cringe-tastic.
think that? Yeah.
I put pretty much that happens to me. I put it straight on the internet like immediately, and then I kind of forgotten I've done it, and then I listen to it and I go, "Well, what the fuck did I just do? Why did I put that on the internet?"
Well,
Why
Duncan,
did I
that's your cringe test, isn't it? Like when when we're submitting our sets to you, you always ask the same question. Does it make you cringe?
the cringe test. I'm a big
Yeah.
subscriber to. If you can listen to something you've made all the way through and not go, then it's all right, isn't it? It's fine.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
There's
Is
nothing
that
you,
your-
it doesn't need anything like.
What's
Is
your
that your-
approach, Duncan? I think we've covered most of everybody else. Like you haven't given us your wisdom.
I've been listening to what you've been saying and thinking about what I would say, but because I can get quite obsessive and I can sort of do nothing for a really long time and then suddenly just binge ideas and then leave them for a really long time and do nothing. But I was thinking, like, I remember when I don't know how this is sort of relevant, but like, I was thinking whilst you guys were talking, like when I started doing music on a computer, I had like I had the demo version of Fruity Loops off the cover of Computer Music magazine, and you couldn't save projects, but you could export them. So I was still able to make entire pieces of music, but I had to do it all in one sitting because I couldn't save them. And as a result of that, I made loads of stuff. Some of it was good, some of it wasn't. But there was something about that kind of thing of like, I can't save this. This is the only, if I close it, it's gone. It's gone forever. I'm going to have to start again. So there was something about that limitation that kind of made me really motivated, and I would put the time in, and then I would kind of, get to a point where I'm like, I don't think I can take any more of this. Like, and then I would export it, and then I'd have a song, and then it would be gone forever, and all I would have was the export. And then I remember kind of getting a full versions of software and feeling like, oh, so relieved that I can like save projects and come back to them later. But then maybe that was the beginning of that, of like, it's kind of pontification, it's ruminating.
Mm.
But I suppose it really depends, like I come from a background of playing instruments and stuff, and I was in bands beforehand, and songs were important, so it's kind of there in my brain that it's sort of like, well, it's got to be a song. And then as I got more into sort of, electronic music, and then heard that like some pieces aren't necessarily songs, they can just be pieces, then you start to think differently. But yeah, it was kind of, it's baked into my brain that like it's got to have a start, a middle, and an end. But yeah,
Actually, made me think of a point there that actually you say about ruminating on bits, or because of the options available in things like Ableton, or if you've got a lot of equipment. And that reminds me of something you were saying, Stephen, before, and that landed with me, is because you're probably one of the more disciplined people in this regard, and be able to take an idea through to a conclusion, but have lots of ideas, but then say, right, this idea, now that idea has been realized, move on to the next idea. And I think it's fair to say a lot of people might be ambitious and have lots of ideas, but then they're trying to put all those ideas into one thing, which is kind of impossible. So I thought that was a really healthy approach that you use, just to, this is the idea, get it through, and then move on to the next thing.
Nick, what's your approach?
Yes, I want to hear this.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, as someone who's maybe, and you're mixing a lot of people's stuff, like.
What was the question?
How do you finish the
Oh,
song?
for fuck's sake.
Getting
How
out
do
of
you
the
finish the
loop.
song?
Getting
I was
out of the
making some
loop.
tea, so I haven't listened to the past like couple of minutes. So
That's okay.
Question is, how do you determine when a song is finished?
oh, my song or whatever I'm mixing.
Yeah, like
Both.
I would,
Yes.
Both, yeah.
yeah, both.
Oh yeah, I don't care about my songs enough to kind of wiggle with them. As soon as it's something that me joy.
Such an
I
underwhelming
assume there will
answer.
be audience which will find it interesting as well. So I don't care enough about that. But with regards to mixing, it just kind of a feeling you get that everything is right, the right things are in place, and it just plays right in my head. But it may be wrong, so you send it to an artist, and artist gets back to with like comments, maybe some new ideas appear, so you kind of start doing that. So it's I think an iterative process in terms of mixing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Some songs require more kind of iterations than others, so it's I don't think there's a definite state that I can describe. It's just kind of when it sounds right, I guess.
The guy who doesn't give a shit about his own music gives the best answer.
There you go.
Yeah, that was a very flaccid answer. Thank you, Nick.
I've got like maybe
Flaccid.
one. I've got maybe a couple more things I'd like to add. Like maybe there's like some sort of more traditional approaches that you can adopt in order to help with the decision making process. So if you're working in the box in the door where you've got these like near endless possibilities to constantly change things, that can sometimes be the thing that actually stops you making decisions and moving forward. So try and sort of just go back in time a little bit and think like, think in takes. Like, is this a good drum take? Then it's good. Print it. It's done. Move on to the next thing. Is this bass line a good take? Print it and bounce as you go. Like, make things sound good and then export them and then like kind of move on. Like, it's very easy to kind of lay down ideas and think, I'll make that sound good later. Actually, maybe try and make it sound good now and then make the decision to say that's it and print it so you can't go back. And this is like what you have. Like, so this is something I do in my videos, like as much as I can, is that like I'll make a sound and then I'll trash the thing that I used to make it so that I'm left with just the audio. And then it's kind of like, well, I could try and remember how I did that, but it's not going to be exactly the same. So I'll just work with what I have. And those are steps, I think, to getting closer to the finishing line. Because it's very easy to just throw all the plugins in and have all of these options. And speaking from experience, I made an album where, I was using loads of samples and loading the session would just be loading all of these samples because I was like, I might want to change that snare. I might want to do this or whatever. And it was taking ages. And then I made a decision. The next time, I'm not going to do that. I'm literally just I'm not even going to use MIDI. I'm not even going to have MIDI. I'm going to record the MIDI to an audio track. And then it's like, it's there. It exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a thing. Whereas like in the other phase, it's kind of like, it's still ingredients, So that's something that and it's like with Stephen, like, you were sending me stems of ideas. And, I was kind of like, well, that's it. That's the idea. That's it. That's enough to get me going,
I did think of something else. I think in a lot of things, people have mentors. Like they do internships or they are apprenticeships is what I'm thinking of. Like in not just in music, but like they go and observe somebody who knows a lot more than they do. So if there's somebody who's getting the results that you really desire to get for yourself, I would suggest, and you trust them, develop a relationship with them and play them your music and ask them for their feedback. I'm not really big on opinions after something has been created, but while something's being created, I am definitely big on opinions of people I respect who are able to help me get to the desired destination. Because music is like, there's so many elements of it to be good at that, like, there's no one person that's going to be great at every single aspect of what music involves. So like having a mentor, I think would be a huge deal. Like somebody you could get feedback from on your songwriting or on your production, on your performance, what like in very specific things, that whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. If it's trying to complete songs, and I would say like find somebody who's a better songwriter than you. If it's in your production, find somebody who's really good at production, etc.
I've got something to add to that, and like at a very specific point where all the ideas are kind of quite raw and you haven't like ascribed any meaning to them yet. So you're probably going to be less fragile to criticism or someone's feedback. Like so that's the thing that you said about like hearing someone's opinions or feedback at the end. Like it's for some people, not for everyone, but like that could be a point where you've poured everything into it. You've worked really hard and someone goes, oh no, it's not really that good. And you're like, well, why? Whereas like in the early stages where you don't really know what a song means or where it's going, and someone says, why don't you try this? You might go, yeah, all right. And then it might turn out quite good, you know. Can you see what I mean? It's sort of like you're less sort of anxious about where it's going because it's just it's a bare bones thing.
It's more malleable then, isn't it?
It's more malleable, it's more pliable.
Yeah.
Whereas like when something's a little bit more set and someone might say, no, I don't like it, then you might be like, I worked a really long time on that and you're telling me that it doesn't work or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I'm with you on that. Like in those sort of stages where you've got an idea, but it's not really molded or whatever. Yeah, I don't know what words to use, but yeah. Good time to get
it's a rich vein of discussion, really.
It is. It's endless. Speaking of endless, someone says in the chat, has anyone played around with endless yet? Yes, I have.
Yeah, I think it's like once a year we pick up. I think once a year we pick up endless for about a week.
For about
and
a day.
Everyone plays with it. Yeah.
And then we don't anymore.
And
I've got the desktop version, still haven't.
What is endless?
Yeah.
It's like it's a free program where you can basically jam out ideas really quickly and smoothly and then instantly send them to someone else and then they can add to it and then send it back. And it is really good fun. It's like a game. It's like a kind of jam music game. I'm just going to go and get a beer. I'll be right back. Damien, take over.
All right. Yeah, endless. I think it's kind of cool what you can get and the looping built in there, but I feel like I always end up making the same 2 beats or whatnot, and then send it to someone like Ned who does like the same 3 things, and that's just not knocking him, which I think it's just a nature of the platform. It's kind of cool, like as far as like things to do on your lunch break on your phone and whatnot, but as far as mobile apps, I prefer was it like Korg gadget where it's more like a proper DAW that I can mess around with.
Well, I agree with you on that. It's repetitive. We did something a few months back. I think it was you, me, and Duncan. It's fun for about an hour, but then I run out of ideas pretty quick after you've sort of played with the reverb a bit, and it's just like it's quite limiting. But it's fun. Yeah, it's fun though. I think you can do sampling with it, can't you, as well? But I think it's probably more things you can do with it. To take it a bit further.
I think the thing is that makes it really difficult is that you're trying to turn, not to get too gushy about it, but you're trying to turn something that's a pretty intimate, emotional, like involved thing for most of us, which is, you know, making music, which is making art, and trying to turn it into like a sort of social liking, comment, follow back, sort of like that paradigm. Like it just doesn't work. Like all parties involved have to be like emotionally involved, or at least like, you know, deeply interested in some sort of concept or something for it to actually go anywhere interesting. Otherwise, you're kind of just like, more or less, it's like, it feels very akin to like who has control of the aux cord, if that makes sense. Like you're sort of just like, here's what I think, here's what I like. All right, now what do you like? Okay, here's what I like. It's not really, you know. Yeah.
Well, I don't think collaboration just comes naturally with anybody. I just don't think you can just start making music with just anybody. You kind of have to
Mhm.
have some kind of connection for it to work. Like, I guess you could play music with anybody. Making good music just doesn't happen with anybody,
Mm.
even
Well,
if
if you-
you like similar
Yeah.
things.
Well, you got to bear in mind a lot of people started out playing in bands where you just anyone who happens to also play, you go, right, okay, let's have a band. That's certainly my experience. And then it does take a while to find a few people where you can start to progress. It takes years. But I suppose now from the perspective of like bedroom music producers, it's a whole different game, isn't it? To sit and just start from scratch. I don't know what it's like because I came from the background of doing things with other people and then started doing this later. But I never started out as doing things on my own. But I don't know where I'm going with this actually. So
I love the control. I love having control over all of it. That's why I started doing electronic music, because I could be the drummer, the bass player, the guitar.
Yeah, yeah.
seven people on
I'm
this
the
call.
overlord.
7 people on
What's the
this,
question?
7 control freaks on the call.
I definitely was in my first band that I was in, and it wasn't because that's my personality. It was just because like I sort of like it was like, well, we got to have some songs. Well, I guess I'll write some. And then when I started writing them, I was like, no, they're going to go like this.
Yeah.
And I was like saying to the drum and the bass, no, they have to go like this. And then I realized that if they didn't go like that, I was going to be really unhappy.
Yeah.
So I started thinking like, oh, and that was kind of like, and then I sort of was or maybe I should sort of stop and let the other guys have a go, but they didn't. So I was like, well, I'll just keep doing it. So, there are some people who they join bands and like, they don't want that responsibility. They just want to, they're good at their instruments and they just want to play and they just want to have a good time. And then there's some people who's like, oh, no, I'm a visionary. I'm a visionary, and like you will do it like this. And so it was kind of like talking about control. It was the next progression for me to sort of have the space where I could do that and not feel like I'm stepping on anyone, or being bossy or whatever, or controlling to other people. But like, I think, the other guys in that band at the time were okay with that. They were like, yeah, it's fine. You've got songs. Let's play them. But yeah. So,
Well, there's a new question.
where are we now?
How Damien, do your job.
Gosh,
There's a new question.
maybe you had something else to say about the topic, but okay, moving on.
I didn't know what the topic was.
How would you go about when you feel like you are stuck with some hardware synth and keep making the same sounds, but feel like the synth has more potential? Sorry, can't relate. I have a 303. It does the same thing every time, and I love it.
Yeah, I'm sort of like, I don't know. I don't really. I mean, I have like Ableton, obviously, and I've got other synths like Reason, but I don't really have that. I mean, I've got an SH101, and I was like, I know it can do a lot, but I know it can also only do a certain amount, and that's kind of what's nice about it. It's reliable. I don't know if I have any synths that have like a huge amount of it. Well, the Octatrack, I suppose. Let me read the question again. Someone else speak.
Watch some YouTube tutorials on the particular synth you have.
100%. Like anything you get that's at least somewhat recent. Like, all right, my Roland MC808 Groovebox from the early 2000s. It's hard to find video tutorials on, but anything a little bit more modern than that, there's probably someone going over how it works or how to make a certain sound on that. So I would always just dive into that. Someone that knows a little bit more than me, or just explaining how the controls on whatever synth are used. And when that fails, just map expression. If you're an Ableton user, just expression control everything random and set that to some parameters and just start fudging with it.
Yeah, I think like if there's something that you just like, it's very easy to just sort of ignore things, and just like, it's very easy to get excited about one specific thing and focus on that and almost kind of rinse it out and then ignore other things. So try and look for all of those things that you've kind of ignored and go, all right, I need to just really understand what this is. And I'm doing this all the time. Like, what actually is that? I haven't been paying that any attention at all. And then just spend like some time. And it's important to not feel, disappointed in yourself that you're not achieving anything, because you are, by learning to understand how something works. And then your brain will expand then, and your skill set towards that instrument will expand as well. And you might find something cool and new that you wouldn't have thought to do before in this hugely potential synthesizer that you've been underusing.
It's like the old Tekka guys. You look at some of their early interviews, they'd absolutely rent any equipment they'd have, even the most basic drum machine, a cheap drum machine. They would find ways of absolutely abusing it and getting different sounds out of it. I suppose it's back to that idea of how less is more. If you've got a couple of things, you're going to get more out of it and find ways of doing it. Yeah, some people make whole albums with just a single synth. Yeah, I think it's having too many things, and it's not good necessarily, because then they end up being a certain thing for a certain type of role, a certain sound to them. But how can you break it? Sorry if anyone said that. I just popped away for a moment. But
Yeah, try and make it do something.
that's what I always think.
Or like, just don't be scared to go out of your comfort zone.
Send it a load of random MIDI stuff, like control changes, and then while you're playing around with it and see what it does.
Yeah, do
And like,
things you're not supposed to with
If you
it.
have like a lot of freedom as well, like I would say that probably most of us have a lot of freedom to explore things. We haven't got like record companies breathing down our neck going, we need this done like 6 months ago or something. Like we've kind of got like, and that's kind of what's quite nice about working independently, is that you can choose the time at which you make the decisions that you make. And if you want to take a break and just think like, I don't want to make any music, but I really want to understand how this works, then you've got the time to do it. And sometimes not understanding how something works can give you the best stuff, because you just mess about and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know I could do that, or even what's just happened, but I love it. And yeah.
I know I've heard Richard Devine talk about this in the past, where like a lot of times when he gets either a new piece of software or a new piece of hardware, a lot of times to learn what it can and can't do and how to really push it, his general sort of outline is make an entire track using just that thing. That kind of comes with some limitations, like depending on what it is, something like just because it's in my lane, something like the Analog 4, you can make an entire track using just that synth. So try and do that. Like try and actually design your kick drum, design, a snare drum, all that sort of stuff. Figure out ways to make it all work at the same time. If it's not something that has like, a sequencer, or maybe it's just, a synth plugin or whatever else like that, you can still do the same thing, just use your DAW, and rather than bringing in a kick drum sample, actually go through the process, not going to the preset for the kick drum, like actually go through and make a kick drum with the synth. Like, and if you don't know how to do that, you can just about any synth tutorial on how to design kick drum or hi-hat, chances are your synthesizer will be able to do that. It'll have those fundamentals. And like that process of designing that stuff, you're going to stumble on interesting things.
Another suggestion is if look to see if your synth has a Discord, and then you'll just automatically be in a community of people who are exploring.
Yeah,
and you can also ask them questions.
Find people who own the same stuff as you, and ask them. Yeah, start talking about, ask questions, and you'll find stuff. Most communities are generally quite friendly.
Then you can ping each other at 2 o'clock in the morning with your latest Octatrack discoveries, which I welcome on a Tuesday night at 2 a.m.
Also, speaking of Discords, there is a Ned Rush Discord. If you have not joined, I believe there is a link somewhere. I don't have it with me right now.
No, you have to go through Patreon now.
Oh,
Oh,
I
Patreon
changed it.
benefit.
I changed it after getting some feedback from.
okay. Well, now I'm sorry. There's an exclusive Patreon Discord. Also, earlier, Stephen was talking about getting a mentor. On said Patreon, Ned offers one-to-one tuition at different price scales. If you want lessons and are interested in Ableton Max, MSP, Octatrack, or
As does Alex as well. Is that what you do?
yeah.
You do that on your Patreon as well?
I will be putting tiers on. I will be putting tiers on there for it soon. I don't actively advertise about it at the moment, but yeah, always open to inquiries. My email's on my YouTube channel.
Sweet. So, oh, sorry, Damien, were you gonna?
No, I think whatever you're going to say is more important.
I was going to read one of the questions.
Yes.
I might have to duck out, gents, before.
Okay, well, do that now before.
Real
I'm
quick,
going to leave the
question,
virtual
otherwise you'll be
pub. I'm going to
stuck
leave the
here.
virtual, but yeah, that's what I thought. So
Real quick,
Yeah.
the question though is, what are some of the most inspiring electronic music albums? Quick, what are the most inspiring electronic music albums before
Give
you
us that
go?
before you leave. Yeah.
for me,
Yes.
like what? How many? Like a number or just like one?
Just some.
Yeah, well, 1, 2, 3 tops.
I mean, like Drux by Aphex Twin comes to mind. I really liked Pieces in a Modern Style by William Orbit when I was like 11. Also, I bought it thinking it had the Tiesto remix of Adagio for Strings on it by Samuel Barber, but it didn't. It was just the slow piece. And but that really got me into kind of like all of those just electronic sounds and I grew up liking, like, it was all trance and garage and stuff coming through at that moment, like when I was kind of like growing up and everything. So I liked a lot of like trance compilations, Ibiza compilations. That was so all those sounds that were coming out from like Positiva releases and Alice DJ and things like that. Like that was really influential. So maybe not answering the question, but definitely Drux by Aphex Twin. Boards of Canada, Music Has the Right to Children. I still really rate that. And Pieces in Modern Style by William Orbit holds a soft spot for me. God, it's a really hard question to think of stuff but a lot of Aphex for sure. The Richard D. James album as well. Aphex Twin selected album works 85 to 92. Surely that has to be. I'm sure everyone would pick that here. Chemical Brothers.
Yes.
The one with Hey Boy, Hey Girl, Surrender.
Yeah.
That was later.
Yeah. My mum had that actually, and she had all the good albums. I just took them I just picked them up, and listened to them. And she liked all that stuff. So
Superstar DJs, here we go.
yeah. It was good. Music Response as well. I liked it. It's got some really good tracks on that actually. Fatboy Slim. Whatever. I mean, these are more shaping albums rather than things I go back to time and time again, which
I think
tends
that
to be
meets.
things
I think
like
that meets the criteria. Inspiring. There are sort of things that set you off, and there are some things that you keep revisiting. Oh my god, we've just had a super chat.
Yeah, they're very personal. Those really, I'm sure everyone's got their own personal. But yeah, those before that, my leaving suggestions would be those. Just because I've got work in the morning.
Gotcha. That was way more than 3.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Sorry.
Great.
Well, once you get me started, I'm hard to stop. So
well, that was why I was like, let's not ask the question. Leave before we ask the question, because otherwise you'll
Never.
get sucked back in.
We need the opinion. Okay.
Sure. All right. Thanks everyone. Thanks
Nice
chat.
one, Alex.
Cheers.
Yeah,
See you next
cheers,
time.
Good to
everyone.
see
See
you.
you around. Yeah, take care. Cheers, chat. Bye.
All right.
Before we move on, Duncan, you need to get Jake to record you like a super chat sample. So that way you have it set up anytime you live stream. If
Super
somebody-
chat.
Yeah, exactly.
Was
But
the
with his
reverb on
voice.
just then?
Yeah, but his voice is better than yours.
Damn.
Oh yeah, he can. Yeah, no. Oh yeah, he's the actual voice actor. Thank you for
All
the
right.
super chat. Who else wants to list some?
Well, Gus started talking first, so he goes next.
Go on, Gus.
Furious Angels by Rob Dugan and Broken Soul Jamboree by David Tipper. Those are probably
By
the two
by
most.
Tipper.
Yeah, David Tipper.
Yeah. Those are two albums I don't think I've heard, so I might have to listen to them.
For sure. Super good.
Alan?
I would say early stuff would have been things like Kraftwerk, the Computer World album. Probably one of my favorite tracks by them that blew me away was the Tour de France. Some earlier like electro music caught my ear as a youngster as well. I say that was definitely, and then I suppose getting into some of the crossover stuff that Alex was talking about. But I would say the first three albums of Ulteca in the more kind of that sort of area. That definitely the first three albums. I can't remember their names. They're Tribe Hite, those ones. I'm pronouncing that right.
Amber, Incunabula,
Yeah, those three.
or Incunabula.
I'm trying to think of anything else that's out the ordinary. I certainly like. Actually, I'm shamelessly love of like 80s, like pop, synth pop, that type of stuff. Gary Newman, those type of things. Like, it's great. And I think they're moving on. What other stuff I'm trying to think of, purely electronic. Like I remember sort of early 9 Inch Nails records. They were certainly the first album I thought was great when that came out. And there's some other people who used to play around with sort of sampling and stuff like that, early sampling. Like there's a band called Renegade Soundwave. There's another quite influential back in the day. Yeah, that's what comes to mind now. There's probably others I'm going to kick myself, but there's a few there.
Steve.
Yeah.
Stephen?
Pre-Millennium Tension by Tricky, Homogenic, Bjork, Come to Daddy, Apex Twins, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, Brian Eno and David Byrne, Pretty Hate Machine, 9 Inch Nails, stuff like that. Oh, Meat Beat Manifesto. I can't think of which the album is. I think it might be called 99%. The one where he samples Clockwork Orange is in my brain now.
Oh yeah, that's an awesome one.
Yeah.
I know exactly what song you're talking about. Meaty break.
Yep.
Nick?
That predates all the kind of like Walk Record stuff, like that album you're talking
Yep.
about. I think it's slightly earlier.
Yep.
It's like late 80s or something.
Very early Meat Beat Manifesto.
Yeah.
Nick?
Yeah, I would say Boards of Canada, probably Gao Gaddy or Joe Gaddy, whatever you call it. Blade, Not for Threes, and I would say Chemical Brothers, Dig Your Own Hole, I guess. Like 3 albums that inspired me the most in terms of like what sound do I love.
Damien?
Mine is also Boards of Canada, Gio Gotti, also Chemical Brothers, Dig My Own Hole. And then as far as like most inspiring things, I think it'd have to be CFAX Live. After I heard that, I knew what I had to do.
What did you have to do, Dave?
Get wild.
Okay, it's my turn now.
John Barry.
Square Pusher.
John Barry and
John
John Barry.
Barry. John Barry has done electronic. The soundtrack to On Her Majesty's Secret Service had some synthesizers in it in the late 60s. And for a mainstream soundtrack, that was unheard of at the time. But I wouldn't say that that's up there. But I'm with you. Dig Your Own Hole. I keep listening to it all the time. It's in my car. Go Plastic. A handful of Ortega. I mean, anything Ortega really. Lunatic Harness by Musique. I've been listening to like a lot of Janet Jackson recently. I really like who are those guys? Was it Jimmy Jam?
Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis.
I just think their production is so good. Like they're just really, it's like really dry and sort of synthetic, and everything's really gated, and I just really like that at the moment. I mean, that's old, but that's inspiring me now. But yeah, there's a handful of stuff that I just think will be good forever. I'll never get bored of. I'm trying to think.
Speaking of electronic soundtrack, what about Wendy Carlos for Clockwork Orange?
Yeah.
How did he make his face like that?
What the fuck?
I was telling Duncan, I don't know why it does this. If I close the camera out.
We just thought you loved to see your face.
I'm going to make you feel better if I do it too.
He's going to be that's going to be the reaction cam.
No, if I stop my video and start it again, it does that every time. I like this. I think you should leave that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my new video.
It's creepy.
What's this video about? It's about my eye. Sorry about that, everyone.
This video is so new. This video is so new. Oh, come on. That was funny. Fine. That was a good joke.
Oh, some people are posting some of their favorites in
What are they
the
saying?
chat now. Ned Rush, what do you think of Brace Yourself music? Yeah, I love it. Love that record. That was sort of yeah. I don't know where to start with that one. It's kind of it's got so much going for it. I would play it right now, but I'll get a copyright strike. Janet Jackson, Pleasure Principle is the killer tune.
Yep, Off Control.
I sort of like find things from the past every now and again that I kind of think, oh my god, this was just so good, and sort of think like it's almost a shame that people still don't do stuff like this. But
someone's mentioned Talk on there. That's a blast from the past. These sort of synth pop 80s stuff. Like they were kind of not super mainstream, but they made some quality music. I was listening to some of their stuff recently. I'd totally forgotten about it. So thanks for flagging that on the chat there.
also like a lot of Blah One. His stuff always sounds interesting and kind of like, how on earth did you do this? It sort of sounds alien, not alien, but kind of out of this world. It doesn't sound like anything anyone else is doing, which is always interesting.
We've got DJ Shadows introducing on the.
Oh, that's a yes.
It's classic.
Oh, what's the group? Is Uncle? Or is it a group called Uncle? I only heard
Uncle,
the first album. That was some good stuff. I think they've put out other albums, but I only heard the first one. Like spelled with a K, UNKLE.
Yeah, that's one
Oh,
of my favorite albums as well.
I thought of another one as well, with like something that really, really changed me was Martes by Murkoff. That was an album from 2002 that I heard, and I was just like, I didn't think that you could do electronic music this way. Like I heard things on there, I was like, of course you can do that, but it hadn't occurred to me, like
I
lots
hadn't
of
heard of
things.
it. What kind of stuff is it?
It's kind of like, it's lots of sort of minimalist classical music, like sampled and put to like these really tiny clicky electronic beats, but there's some really interesting stuff on there where kind of like the reverb's been sampled but played in reverse, and there's just like so many good ideas on it. And it's 21 years old now, but I don't think it sounds old at all. I think if you listen to it now, you'd still be like, wow.
I feel
What are
like
some of your favorite Square Pusher albums?
Well, I just wanted to mention, as far as that, like Murkoff, like the way that he's able to like pinpoint where resonance is at its maximum sort of clickiness, and like it's nearly tiptoeing into being a little too much, but it's not. Whereas like a lot of times resonance can be like overused to where it's, Damien, I'm looking at you. You can have too much resonance in your filter.
Don't listen to him, Damien.
Either way, I just
think he's
wanted to
listening to
mention
any
that
of us.
about Murkoff. No, he's definitely not.
What are some of your favorite Square Pusher albums, Ned?
Go Plastic, Ultra Visitor. I like some of the ones where he's playing all the instruments. Like Hard Normal Daddy is good because of just what it's trying to do, which is to sort of simulate Weather Report, but with samplers and stuff, and it does it very well. But I don't think it's necessarily his. I think his best stuff is 2000 and 2004. That's when that's all the stuff I like, when he went really digital and kind of avant-garde.
What are some of the defining things from that period that you really like about him?
I think it's the sound design and the sort of and then later I kind of discovered people like Todd Dockstader from like the 60s or 70s or something, which was kind of playing with this idea about how music doesn't necessarily have to occupy one space. It can actually occupy lots of different spaces, and those spaces can come and go throughout an entire piece, which is something that like electric.
What does that mean?
Well, so, you might have a sound that's kind of like in a really large reverb, and then you might have something that's in a very different reverb somewhere else. So it's kind of like, generally a lot of music, we might think of just being, when we put reverb on stuff, we're trying to create a sense of space, but it's generally one sense of space.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like, I think what Square Pusher was doing in that period was sort of looking back to some of the music concrete stuff of the 50s and 60s, where they were kind of splicing together all of these different spaces to kind of confuse you a little bit, to disorientate you, which I've always found sort of quite interesting. Dub Reggae also did the same sort of thing, albeit in a slightly more lo-fi way. That like, it kind of makes you think like, yeah, why does reverb have to be one specific space? Why can't it be lots of spaces?
I kind of like it too when you like sometimes you like have a loop going, like you'll have like a snare drum have reverb on, and then you just cut the reverb off, and it creates a cool feeling.
Yeah, like like gating reverbs and then playing them backwards, and just sort of taking things out of a kind of linear fashion and making them a little bit more kind of, they can come and go in all different directions and stuff, which I kind of quite like. Autechre does that sometimes, but not quite the same, I don't think.
I talked about this on one of our last things, that like Autechre seems to sort of use reverb as like a percussion element, to where like just letting the
Like an
reverb
instrument.
come. Yeah, and like where it's you would normally have a snare. If you have a kick drum going 4 to the floor, and on the 2 and the 4, instead of having an actual snare drum, if you just send the kick drum through a shitload of reverb for just that one little section where a snare would be, you'll get the same effect as a snare.
Yeah. I like when people kind of take tools and sort of do things that you're not really supposed to do with them and make it work. when it comes to sort of electronic stuff. But then, you know, I still like to listen to a lot of old dub reggae remixes and all that sort of stuff. King Tubby, Mad Professor, and just, you know, how they would just kind of use the mixer as the instrument and throw things into reverbs and let them ricochet off like a firework or something. I still think that stuff sounds good. I wouldn't say it's electronic music, but it's very, very aligned with what people do in electronic music these days, in a lot of techno and stuff like that. So even though dub reggae is not electronic music as such, I still look at it as that. So Stereo Lab, yeah, good. Overmono, haven't listened to much Overmono, but I think one of them is a Patreon of mine. Don't quote me on that. Someone told me after they saw their name in the credits. If you are, I'd like to know. Maybe we could chat. Should we move on? Damien, got anything to move us on with?
I think this is a great time to wrap it up.
All right, let's wrap it up. How long have we been going?
I think 2.5 hours.
10 hours. Oh no, not 10 hours. That's the average. That's the average.
That's how long he's been
duration.
awake.
10 minutes.
Not bad. We're usually really boring after about 15 minutes, so we managed to get 2 hours out of it.
Okay, all right, let's wrap it up. So thanks, guys, for hanging out, chatting, sharing your ideas. It's all good stuff. Thanks for the viewers, and if you're watching in the future, thanks for watching from the past in the future.
From the past.
Thanks,
for
future,
the future,
for watching in the future. Thank you from the past.
There you go. That's it.
Nick, say goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, everybody.